Okay, good to go? Great. Well, good afternoon. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us in today's press conference. We are here to celebrate the power of worker organizing in the service industry and to discuss the recent settlement reached between the Bartmann Group and the Attorney General's office. Today, we are honored to be joined by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, organizers from the Restaurant Opportunity Center, known as ROC, and my fellow coworkers here to share their stories. So recently, we won more than $230,000 in unpaid wages and damages for workers for the Bartmann Group. We are here to tell the story of this victory, which would not have happened without us, workers who joined together to fight for what we deserve. So my name is Allie Hosman, a former Bartmann Group restaurant worker. I worked at several of Kim Bartmann's restaurants over the course of 3 years in the back of house. I want to make one point very clear before we begin, which is that the pandemic is not to blame for the mistreatment of workers or wage theft that my fellow coworkers and I experienced at the hand of Kim Bartmann and the Bartmann Group. Workers started organizing in January of 2020, well before the pandemic began, to address the mismanagement and violations we were experiencing at work for years. The pandemic made things much worse for me and my coworkers and workers across our industry. The conditions that the pandemic created were the catalyst for us to voice our grievances, equipped ourselves with the knowledge of our rights, and to join together to demand justice. Along with Attorney General Ellison, whose office led the investigation into the Bartmann Group, several of my coworkers will share how wage theft in our workplace has impacted our lives and what this victory and settlement means to them. So our first speaker today will be Dr. Sekou Sibi, the Executive Director and President of ROC United.
Thank you, Ali. I'm Dr. Sekou Sibi, President and CEO of the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United. Each day, we hear stories from restaurant workers who are not compensated for overtime work, or the large portion of the tips are taken away from them. The pandemic has underscored these abuses that restaurant workers have long experienced. Today, however, it's loud and clear that these $230,000 in paid wages settlement marks a monumental victory for us and for restaurant workers and the hardworking families that we serve. I'm proud of our courageous restaurant workers in Minneapolis who have stood up for the right and against unlawful labor practices. I applaud Attorney General Ellison and his staff for a remarkable effort for not allowing the Bartmann Group, no matter how large it is, to shirk its obligation and walk away from the workers its own. And I truly commend the leadership of Eli, Director of ROC Minnesota, who has been tirelessly organizing and strengthening our members and other restaurant workers in the state. This settlement sends a strong message that wage theft and unjust treatment of workers do not have a place in the restaurant industry. And it reflects our utmost commitment to advance economic justice and the racial and gender equity for all restaurant workers nationwide. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for speaking, Dr. Sibi, and I really appreciate your presence on this call, so thank you. Another quick piece of housekeeping. So for the reporters on this call, if you have a question, please post your name and your organization at any given time in the chat box so we can keep track of who's in the queue, and you will be asked to unmute yourself when you ask the question during the Q&A. And now it's my pleasure to, Attorney General Ellison on the call? Wonderful. So it's my pleasure to hand it off to Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Hello, everybody. Keith here, and I'm so glad to be here with you all. It's really just a thrill. You know, I used to be in Congress for 12 years, and I worked with ROC all that time. big fan of Saru and the whole team, all you guys. And we worked together on many, many things, one fair wage, all that stuff. And I came to the conclusion after working on a lot of wage-related issues in Congress that I might personally be able to be more effective as a state attorney general. And I'm not underestimating it, nor am I puffing it up when I say I left Congress because I wanted to work on issues of wage theft and not just pass laws saying don't do it, but actually get after the people who were actually doing it. Because in my view, you know, our economy simply is not working for working class people, and it has to be made to work. And that means we have to enforce the laws that are already on the books and pass better laws too. And it's also important to point out that so much of American racism blows through the economy. So yes, you look at a George Floyd savage beating and murder at the hands and torture at the hands of Derek Chauvin. Yes, that's racism. But what about the fact that so many of the workers who are being victims of wage theft are people who are Black and brown, people who are coming from racial minorities, people who are struggling. And at the same time, not all. So many of the people who are victimized by wage theft are white, and we're more than happy to help them. But it is important to understand that there is a dimension to this problem that is racialized, not 100%, but to a large extent. You know, and it does hurt everyone. In fact, you know, economists have calculated what the losses are, and on average, the average loss per worker over the course of the year is about $2,634 a year. You know, plus, you know, imagine somebody who's already making $27,000 a year, already making $30,000 a year, losing $2,600 per paycheck. And if you look at the whole time that they've been working there on average, that comes out to about nearly $20,000, $17,000 and change is coming out of that worker's pocket out of a whole course of a time. This is contributing to poverty. This is contributing to the working poor. This is forcing people to food shelves and on to SNAP and other important benefits. Thank God they're there, but they actually result in being a subsidy to the companies who victimize people in wage theft. So we started a wage theft unit when I got to the AG's office. We began that for the very purpose that we're talking here today. And, you know, the heroes here are the workers who stood up, the workers who complained, the workers who said, we're not just going to sit up here and take this. You know, the bottom line is the workers are the ones who lay it all on the line and run the big risk. And it is a risk because you can have these, some employers sort of take dollars out of your pocket per month and keep your job, or you can complain about it and lose the one job you do have. And so it is a very scary thing for workers to come forward. Bless them for doing so. So, you know, this $230,000 to compensate these workers for the failure of Bartmann companies to pay them is a big deal, not only for the dollar amount, but for the fact that this company has publicly been found to have stolen these folks' wages and asked to pay them back. I hope that this press conference today is a signal that no company across the United States that does not deal fairly and pay their workers fairly and pay their workers what the workers are owed can rest safe, padding their own profits by stealing from workers. We're happy to help. And by the way, we consider ourselves allies of businesses that do pay workers fairly. We consider ourselves allies of workers who play by the rules and do the right thing and keep their promises. We consider it to be an injury to the workers, but also to other competitive businesses that have to contend with the wage thieves, who have to compete on a fair basis with the wage thieves. So we're happy to do the work that we're doing. We're honored to be in partnership with you. We consider this to be a great victory, not just for the money, because for some of these companies, the money's not a whole ton of money, but for the symbolic value of saying, we will not tolerate this. Please let everybody know that if you're trying to steal wages in the state of Minnesota, we're the ally of the workers who are going to fight for their money. That's it.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Ellison, for being on this call, and thank you so much for your support. And now I think we'll take it to some former Bartmann workers. Our next speaker will be Naomi Hornstein.
Hey all, and thanks for being here. I feel really inspired to be here and to hear the words of other workers and Attorney General Ellison. Like Ali said, I'm Naomi Hornstein. I started serving at Pat's Tap in 2019. And the beginning, I really enjoyed getting to know my coworkers. It was a really powerful community to be in. But throughout the year, I really started seeing a lot of issues in our workplace. This was even before the pandemic. We went through a lot of general managers until it seemed like the company couldn't find someone to fill the position. And then that work got put on other workers. There were times when our restaurant was short on supplies and we were understaffed for some of our busiest shifts, having to go to tables and say, sorry, we're out of that beer. We're out of what you actually wanted on the menu because we were short on supplies, being the only one on the floor during a really busy shift, which was really terrible and hard for me and my coworkers because it meant working longer and harder hours and having less time and energy for things like our families or other jobs or our studies. I was taking classes at MCTC at the time, and the busy shifts were really hard on me. So, right, even before the pandemic, there were issues, and I and some coworkers started working with ROC organizers to build worker power at Pat's Tap, one of the Bartmann Group restaurants, and to address the issues in our workplace. So we kind of started working together January, February of 2020. And then in March of 2020, I got a text from my manager that Pat's would be shutting down because of the pandemic. And this was the beginning. We had no idea what was coming. We had no idea when or if things would open back up. I had no idea that there was going to be unemployment insurance available. And I was really terrified of the pandemic. I was like really scared of getting sick or my family getting sick. And on top of all of that, not sure when I could work again. And the next week, I was expecting my paycheck from my last week of work that I had worked before the pandemic, which was over $600 in both wages and tips. The way that we got paid at Pat's Tap was our tips were in our paycheck. And so I was waiting for that money, and I, along with about 200 other employees, received an email from Kim Bartmann that we would not be getting our pay. And there was no mention of when our paychecks would come. And I felt really angry and scared in that moment. I had already earned this money and I had no idea when I was going to make my next paycheck. And on top of that, all of my coworkers were in the same boat. And that was really scary for me too, because we had built this community and I cared about them. Right. $600 is a lot. And a lot of my coworkers were also missing more than that. It's money that we use to pay for rent and groceries and school and so many other things. And it was money that I had already earned. And because we had kind of already started building relationships with organizers at ROC and with each other to address issues in our workplace, when this happened, we were able to really quickly get a petition out to demand our wages. And we got over 91 workers to sign the petition and almost 3,300 community signatures demanding our wages from the Bartmann Group. And so this kind of gave us a lot of energy. And over the next few weeks, we had a lot of calls together. We connected with workers across all of the Bartmann restaurants. And we would have Zoom calls together to think about how can we demand what we're owed and damages for the fact that we didn't get paid on time during the start of a pandemic. And so we worked together, and we also knew that like many of our coworkers needed that money now, needed it yesterday. And so we actually took upon ourselves to make a GoFundMe to mitigate the harm that this wage theft caused. So we as workers came together to fundraise, organize in our community, and to get people money if they needed it for emergencies before the Bartmann Group even did anything to help us. So that was one of the powerful things that came out of the organizing and working together, and that we were the ones doing that work. Then Then after that, we continued to amplify the voices of workers. We realized through our conversations with each other that many workers had been missing overtime pay from years prior, and that checks had been bounced. And so what we did is we worked together and we hand delivered a list of demands to the Bartmann group, which included damages for the month that we were missing our paychecks. I haven't received my check yet for the damages that we won in this settlement, but I'm really excited to cash it. I think it's going to mean a lot to me. It's going to be a really powerful moment for me and my coworkers that we took that risk to organize together and to fight for what we were owed, and that we got this settlement. It really means a lot. And I feel really proud of that collective work that we've done to win this $230,000 for workers. And it showed me the power of organizing together, even in really, really dark times. Again, the beginning of the pandemic was a really scary time, and this was a hopeful thing that we could do together. And we know that workers like us experience this kind of thing all the time. And so this is a moment where we organized to get the money we deserved, and also to prove to restaurant owners and our fellow workers that we're stronger when we work together. So that is kind of my story about how this has all impacted me. And I feel really grateful to be here with my coworkers. And there's so many people who are also working behind the scenes who aren't here, who are doing really, really important work for restaurant workers. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Naomi, for coming today and for speaking and sharing your story. And all right, next we have another Bartmann Group worker, Mark Rincon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Rincon. I'm a former bartender for Kim Bartmann at Red Stag. I've been in the restaurant industry for 30 plus years. I've worked for Kim Bartmann a small fraction of that time. I am a Rock, Minnesota member. Kim Bartmann stole our money, plain and simple. Kim stole our money at the beginning of the pandemic. She stole our money when we were worried about our livelihood. We were worried about contact with our customers. We were worried about our health. The arrogance and entitlement she displayed isn't just cringeworthy, it was illegal. It was literally heartbreaking and life-altering for many of us. We all depended on our tips to live, and we depended on those tips on a week-to-week basis. Kim Bartmann stole those tips and our hourly wages. Many of our payroll checks bounced, consequently causing us the additional stress of banking issues, and there were many. Kim Bartmann stole those wages and used them for her own purposes. I knew the minute my checks bounced, there were going to be other employees in the same position. I needed to find out how many of those employees her theft had affected. It was many employees, as it turns out, from all across the restaurants. My next step was to mobilize our restaurant, my restaurant, and to speak out. There is strength in numbers. If you want something to happen, make it happen. Employees don't usually right their wrongs on their own. Rock, Minnesota collectively led a core group of us former employees through the process to finally win this settlement, a settlement that is unheard of in our industry. Our voices, with the help, the guidance of Rock, Minnesota, proved to one very prominent restaurateur in Minneapolis that we, her former employees, won't roll over and accept her unlawful business practices. We won't allow her to steal our wages. We have voices. Our voices matter, and our voices will be heard. That core group of us spent many, many hours doing this, making the phone calls, writing the letters, and talking with the AG's office. Many hours on Zoom calls. For that group, it was nearly 40 hours a week, which finally won the settlement. Some of the consequences of her theft resulted in many of us missing rent payments, our car payments, insurance payments, and sadly, buying food. Might sound extreme, but it's the truth, and we lived it. This settlement by no means makes up for the financial and emotional anguish we endured. I want to reiterate, it does not make up for the financial and emotional anguish we endured. It is only an initial step towards justice and accountability. Let me say, organizing works. Teaming with Rock, Minnesota to help our cause was a no-brainer. Speaking up and speaking out works. Restaurant workers are not just vital to restaurateurs, but to the viability of Minneapolis itself. We should be treated accordingly. Restaurateurs are not just successful, because of their ideas and their financial backers, they are quite honestly successful off the backs, the hard work, and it is hard work, of their employees. Don't lose sight of that. Restaurateurs must not lose sight of that. I just want to say congratulations to those of us that put in the hard work. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rock, Minnesota. And a special thank you to Eli, who led the charge. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Mark. I definitely feel exactly how you're feeling as well. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I also wanted to make a quick announcement that Dr. Sibby has unfortunately had to leave, but any questions directed to him, I'm sure that we can just collect and answer later. Great. So we are going to hear from two more speakers this afternoon, and next we'll have a chance to hear from Rachel Heitzmecka.
Hello, hello. My name is Rachel Heitzmecka, and I had been working as a server at Pat's Tap for a year before the shutdown. Thinking back to the moment I received that email from Kim explaining that that she wasn't going to pay us for the week prior, I remember feeling panic and confusion. I remember thinking, can she even do this? Is this legal? And then texting Naomi and Eli, like, what are we gonna do? And thank goodness I had met with Rock members just before this happened to talk about some of the issues of mismanagement we were facing at Pat's Tap. Otherwise, I would have had no idea where to start organizing around this, and I would have felt so hopeless. When I lost my job at Pat's, knowing I had a paycheck coming at the end of that week was the only sense of security I had, because I hadn't applied for unemployment yet, and I was relying on that money to give me a little time to figure it out. I had no idea how much I was going to make on unemployment, and what that would even cover. Was I going to be able to afford rent, groceries, my phone bill? My anxiety was already through the roof. And so finding out that I wasn't going to receive that pay was incredibly stressful and infuriating. But I knew I wasn't alone. So I began reaching out to Rock members and my fellow Bartmann workers to generate some conversation around next steps. Mainly, how could we take care of each other, and what were we going to do to make sure we got paid? We put a tremendous amount of time and energy into organizing. We wrote a demand letter to Kim, a petition for the public to sign. We started a GoFundMe for workers who weren't able to collect unemployment. We had weekly meetings. We spoke with a lawyer. We called the Attorney General's office to file complaints. We were unrelenting, and we weren't going to stop until we got our money. It took a month and a half before I finally received my paycheck in the mail. And once I did, I took a step back from organizing, even though I felt like there was so much more work that needed to be done. But I was exhausted, and with everything going on in the world and in our community, I took this small victory as a win. I cashed the money I was owed, the money I should have never had to fight for in the first place. And that was that. And I didn't really think much more was going to come of it. Fast forward to the beginning of this month, 1 year later, and I'm opening my phone to a text from a fellow Bartmann worker with a screenshot of from an NPR news article with the headline, Minneapolis restaurant workers awarded $23,000 in settlement. And I was like, oh my God, we did that. We put in the work. That was us. And in that moment, the sense of relief that I felt was incredible. It was a sense of relief that I didn't know I would ever feel, because in the service industry, we are taught to settle for the bare minimum treatment from our employers over and over and over again because we are replaceable. And that message is traumatizing. I knew Kim owed her workers more than just those paychecks. I knew there was wage theft going on. So to see the attorney general step in and hold Kim Bartmann accountable is a step in the right direction. This money feels like a win, but at the end of the day, it is money people are owed for the work they have already done. I have yet to receive any damage pay. However, I am going to really enjoy cashing that paycheck. We worked hard during a time of uncertainty and we deserve what we are owed. This was the first time in the 6 years that I've been a server that I felt like I could step into this job title with some hope. And that feeling made all of the tireless work we did worth it. I hope this story inspires other restaurant workers to believe in the power of their voices and to continue to demand better from their bosses. I'm so proud of everyone, all of my coworkers that worked on this campaign. We are so strong when we stand together, and this settlement is proof of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your story. I can certainly relate to everything that you, Mark, and Naomi have all talked about today. As a former worker at multiple restaurants owned by Kim Bartmann, I found myself working long hours, sometimes 50 to 60-hour weeks between multiple locations, without receiving any overtime pay. As service industry workers, we're often kept in the dark regarding our rights as workers. I felt used and violated that my work was being used in this manner. And it took me talking to my father, who's an accountant, and Rock Minnesota members to learn that not receiving proper compensation for my work in this manner was definitely illegal. It's unfortunately commonplace for many workers, both in front and back of house, to work while not receiving adequate compensation. It is because of the work done by my fellow workers and by organizers at Rock Minnesota that really helped me become more fully aware of my rights as a worker in the service industry and how I can fight for justice, not only for my fellow Bartmann workers, but for workers in the service industry as a whole. While a check for damages doesn't solve the overall issues that we as workers face in the service industry, I know that for me, I feel relieved that our work to hold Kim Bartmann accountable paid off. And yeah, now with our final and concluding speaker today, let's hear from Eli Stein, lead organizer for Rock Minnesota.
Thanks, Sally. Hi, y'all. My name is Eli Stein, and I'm the lead organizer with Rock Minnesota. I spent 13 years working in food service in many different positions, and now I work as an organizer supporting workers in my industry to change the industry, our workplaces, and our lives. We're here today to celebrate a victory that represents a huge step for workers in the food service industry in Minnesota. This victory happened because workers came together almost 2 years ago to talk to each other about their problems at work and how to change their workplaces for the better. It happened because workers learned about their rights they didn't know existed, and they stood up for them. This victory happened because the Attorney General and his team took on an investigation and stepped in on behalf of workers to amplify their voices and work towards justice. Wage theft, like the wage theft that happened at the Bartmann Group, happens to workers in our industry all of the time. Before the pandemic, food service workers were just under 10% of the private sector workforce, but according to a 2017 study, we make up over a quarter of all reported minimum wage violations nationally. This happens all of the time. What makes this case exceptional is that workers from 7 different restaurants, workers who didn't know each other, came together to support each other and to fight. To stand up to a boss like Kim Bartmann, a well-known business owner in Minneapolis, takes courage and comes with significant risk. In our industry, workers face retaliation for standing up for their rights. At the Bartmann Group, many workers signed on to petitions and demand letters, and some did not out of fear of losing their jobs and not being rehired when restaurants opened. In May of 2020, 2 months after workers had their wages and tips stolen, a delegation of workers and community members delivered a demand letter to Kim Bartmann that over 70 Bartmann Group workers signed. Workers demanded their stolen wages returned, demand demanded damage paid and more power in their workplaces. In May of 2020, workers raised their voices and demanded their stolen wages. And in May of 2020, workers won those wages. In May of 2020, workers demanded that Kim Bartmann pay them damages to make up for some of the harm caused by her actions. And today, with the support of Attorney General Keith Ellison and his team, workers have won those damages. And in May of 2020, workers demanded a new structure to their workplace, decision-making power and ownership of the profits of their labor. This summer, Kim Bartmann publicly expressed her intent to transition one of her restaurants, Tiny Diner, to a worker-owned cooperative ownership model. Today, workers are winning their demands, and it is because they talked to each other, they organized, they stood up for their rights, and fought for what we deserve. I am so inspired by Allie, Naomi, Rachel, and Mark, and all the other workers who put in long hours to make sure that their coworkers would see damage checks this year. These workers have proved that when workers fight, workers win. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eli. I'm so glad that you're here on this call with us. All right, we're gonna proceed to a Q&A. Let's take a look at the chat. Okay. First question. I'm not sure who we're gonna have ask first questions.
I started putting a list of the questions as they came in the bottom of our script document. And I think the first
Awesome.
question was from, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, but Motion Zahir. And there were two questions. One, well, I'll let you ask them.
Yeah, I wanted to know all the workers who fought for their wages, were they been called back to their work once the businesses were opened? You got it?
I think folks can answer that. I know that Deja, who hasn't introduced herself but is kind of monitoring our chat and who is a former worker, responded in the chat, but maybe Deja, do you want to just unmute, introduce yourself and respond?
Hi, I'm Deja Gendro. I used to work at Tiny Diner, and to your question, I did not receive text, email, call for reemployment, and honestly, I don't think it was necessary, but I didn't get the offer of reemployment anyway, so.
Yeah, I also do remember there being an email sent out to some people, but not to all. Like I didn't get the original email that asked workers to fill out a form if they were interested in coming back. But clearly also if Deja didn't get it and I didn't, it wasn't sent out to everyone for whatever reason. So people, and then I think people had 72 hours or I can find the email, but I think people had a certain amount of time to respond to that if they wanted the chance of coming back. And some folks did, and some folks went back and then left shortly after. I tried to get in contact with people at Pat's Tap and I couldn't.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
You want to go, Rachel?
Sure, yeah. I did receive that email and I remember worrying about if I turn that down, if it would affect my unemployment. So I filled it out saying I did want to come back, and then they closed right away afterwards anyway. So it was like just another like moment of anxiety, and it put me on edge again for sure. But I did receive that email along with some of my other fellow Pat's Tap employees, and one of them called the unemployment office eventually and asked if they declined, if that would affect their unemployment, and apparently it didn't. So in a moment of panic, I almost went back.
I left the service industry for, hopefully, we'll see, to to pursue another career, which has been tough, but never have I ever walked into a restaurant and not thanked the people that work there, because I know how hard their work is.
Yeah, so I think just from our vantage point, we had reports of both being workers, yes, being called back, and others not being. So, yeah. Deja, do you want to pull the next question?
Yes, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Kavia, from the Star Tribune. How much is each worker expected to receive in damages? And I don't know, because it's based off of, Eli, wasn't it based off of overtime hours worked, and with over 200 employees, I mean, it's really hard to say.
I think probably the AG's office, the folks from the AG's office might be best positioned to answer that one.
Keith, you want me to take that? Keith, you're on mute. I'm John Moeller. I'm from an attorney with the AG's office, and the damages are based on overtime hours worked. So the workers are going to receive damages based on overtime wages they were deprived over the last over the 2-year audit period before we started our investigation.
Yeah, this is Keith. Thank you, John. I couldn't figure out how to get off mute. Anyway, I would recommend that folks who want to look at the details of the settlement agreement, we have it printed on our website, and it will vary from person to person. But there is injunctive relief. It's fairly well spelled out and detailed. So just refer to that document. I'd certainly urge anyone who's curious to know to take a close look at that.
And then the next question is for you, Keith Ellison. Why are employers keep breaking laws? And do you think our labor laws have failed us?
Well, not just the laws have failed us, the enforcement has failed us too. I mean, it's both. I mean, it's both the written law, which we need to have better laws on this. And we also need to have the federal government, state AGs, local governments going after wage thieves and people who will violate any kind of workers' rights. Just for those of you who may recall or who read about it, we've seen union slippage since the 1970s, but in 1980 it really hit another gear. Workers, air traffic controllers went out on strike. Ronald Reagan fired them all, and after that time, it was sort of a kind of a bloodbath in labor organizing for a long time. Together with offshoring, outsourcing, fissuring the workplace. And what I mean by that is, if you work at say you work at a hotel in home housekeeping, you probably do not work for that hotel. That hotel probably contracts. And so if you got a beef or a problem, or they're going to say, hey, don't ask me, call the cleaning contractor. So they fissure out the workplace so they don't have nobody has any responsibility or accountability. So there are a lot of tricks, but I believe that movements like this one are going to put us in a whole new space. Every day I'm hearing about successful union drives, workers standing up, and you guys, I think if there's one thing I pray that you take from this is that when you fight together that you win and that you've solved your problem, but there's a whole lot more problem to be solved. So don't stop now.
Can you also expand on the taxes and how the workers will be affected by the bad practices?
Yeah,
and then,
well, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll ask John to jump in on the tax issues, but I can tell you that the settlement says there can be no retaliation. It says that there's a lot of provisions that protect the workers here. But John, do you have anything to add about the tax issue?
Yeah, according to the settlement, the Bartmann companies has to prepare W-2s for all workers because the damage payments are spread out over the next 12 months. There's going to be monthly checks, and so there's going to be separate W-2s for back wages paid out or for damages paid out this year. I'm sorry, those won't be W-2s. Those will be 1099s for damages. The W-2s are for back wages, and those will all be paid out this year. But it's per the settlement, it's the Bartmann Group's obligation to prepare those tax documents for workers. And they're going to be providing those to current employees, and former employees can go to Bartmann and get their tax documents.
Thank you. And then for my colleagues, former Bartmann employees, what would you like to see change in our industry?
So much. I would love to see restaurants across the board, regardless of, if there are 5 employees to 500 employees, that all of them are making a living wage and that all of them are treated with respect and dignity. That's what I'd like to see. I'd also really love to see more restaurants, specifically in Minneapolis, come to the table to fix some of the issues that they also are also contributing to by not paying their workers appropriately or with overtime violations.
Yeah, I think something else that I'm really hoping to see is that people have our backs, and the fear of retaliation, which was really scary when we were doing this work. The fear that we would be fired and not know where to go, not be able to be rehired, stops us from doing this work. So having community support and having the support of folks across the industry is really important. And I think also that something that we've really discovered through this organizing is the common wage theft that happens. And so making sure that we're really stopping that in its tracks and working together as people in the industry to make sure that we are fighting sexism and racism in the restaurant world, as we see it's very rampant. And I think just the ability for workers to feel secure in their job, to get paid what they deserve to get paid, and to get paid more than a living wage. It's hard work. And to have that power, that worker power together, that we know that we can get what we deserve and fight for what we deserve without being scared about losing our jobs.
I would really like to see a union. I would really like to see a union step in, and we have more control over how we're treated. For instance, we don't get breaks. We don't get lunch hours. We don't get dinner hours. We don't get any of that. We are on the job from beginning to end. If we ask about it, we're laughed at. It's just the way it is. Always has been since I started 30-some years ago, was to the very end. Why is it that in some industries, in other industries, they are allotted those things which are law? And in the restaurant industry, it's not enforced. We are often told and threatened with, you are replaceable. We know we're replaceable, but do we need to hear that on a weekly basis or on a daily basis? No, I don't think so. It's not necessary. I think that's what I would like to see. I would like to see restaurant employees gather together and unionize. I think that would help our industry a lot more.
Could I say something? This is Keith again. Sorry for breaking in, but just so you know, Minnesota requires meal and rest breaks. If you don't get them, document it and let us know. John, you want to say anything about that? Because I mean, to hear Mark say we don't get our breaks, that's pretty disturbing. And we need, one thing we can do together is really start cracking down on that. Because it's if they make you work through your break and they don't pay you for the extra money, first of all, that's illegal, but there's a lot of problems. There's more than one problem there. John, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I would just echo what you said. Minnesota law requires breaks if you work a certain amount of time. It requires meal breaks if you work a certain amount of time. So if you're working long hours and not getting those, I encourage you to come to our office. And I hope this settlement and the work that we've done with Eli demonstrates that if people come to the AG's office with concerns, we will listen and we will get the work done.
Could somebody put the provisions, I think it's the Minnesota statute that requires meal and break times in the chat so people can see that.
I'll do it, Keith.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, to be clear, the majority of us, we know that we are afforded and we deserve and we should be getting breaks and we should be getting meal time, dinners and lunches and breakfast and what have you. We know that. But to force the issue is to deal with the retaliation. And that is 100% guaranteed that that's going to happen. And by retaliation, I mean extra work. I mean loss of hours, loss of schedule, that type of thing. We know the majority of us who have been in the industry for quite some time, we know that we are owed these things. But again, this is the situation that we're dealt with.
Well, Mark, all I'll say is if you get to a point where you just had it and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, document it, let us know, and then let us be the bad guy.
I wish for our restaurant industry, and I said this before, a union for restaurant workers, a union to step in there, much like the Teamsters union that says, no, you can't do that. You can't force your employees to work 8 hours from beginning to end on their feet without breaks, without dinner, what have you. And this is just one of the things that I'm talking about. This is just off the top of my head.
Well, I agree with you, but between now and then, give us a call.
Thank you.
Before we move to the next question, just wondering if Rachel or Deja or any other workers wanted to weigh in on changes to the industry.
I would just like to echo what was already said. I know a lot of the time, especially working for Kim, I never got a break. They were always on you to keep going. You got to keep moving. You could never eat anything, drink anything. You couldn't, only break I got was like running to the bathroom. And that was it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and to just kind of piggyback off it, I think that's where better wages come into play too, because I think with service industry workers, there's a fear that if you do take any time to step off the floor, you could miss out on tables, which means less tips, which means less money. And like, if you're scrambling to make money for rent, like, I'd rather be on my feet. I'd rather keep working. And then if I have to also worry about retaliation for asking for a break, like, just makes more sense to buckle down and do it, which is just so wild. And that needs to change for sure. And I think that will start to happen with better wages. If I feel more secure in my job, then I'll feel more secure asking for what I deserve.
And going back to Amy's question, did that conversation kind of hit on what you were hoping for, or did you want to add anything to that? Awesome, thank you. Anthony, did you want to ask your question to Keith Ellison?
Oh, that was just a follow-up question about the recall. So if there is no retaliation, how come it's not part of the settlement that the worker should be recalled?
I'll let John answer that one. As I review the settlement, there might be a great reason, but John, how come rehire was not in the settlement agreement? Can you speak to that?
It wasn't part of the investigation. It's not covered in the settlement. So if there are retaliation issues, that's something we can talk about more. It's nothing that was waived in the settlement. So I would encourage anyone to get in touch with me after, and we can discuss any potential retaliation concerns.
Thank you.
To answer how many workers are going to receive wages, there are over 200 employees, and those who receive the wages, I'm not sure if that would be all of us or it's all based on hours worked.
Yeah, and I think the numbers are probably published in the settlement, but maybe if anyone from the AG's office has the specifics on, this was Mr. Zahir's question, how many workers in total were to receive wages?
I don't have specific numbers off the tips of my fingers, but there's different numbers of workers who are receiving the overtime wages versus the back wages related to the COVID closures. But one thing that the settlement does, and that we're going to be working out, is that not all of the back wage checks that went out were actually cashed by workers. So part of the work that we're going to be doing is to make sure that everybody who should have received wages does receive wages.
Looks like the next question is to the former Bartmann employees. What are the workers on this call doing now? Did any return to Bartmann restaurants? Are any of us back in the restaurant industry? I am not. I am self-employed. Kim Bartmann really left a bad taste in my mouth, so I decided to work for myself.
Yeah, I completely switched life paths. I hope that until the service industry changes, like, I will do whatever it takes to support workers in that situation. But my mental health was so terrible working for Kim Bartmann that I will never return to work for her.
I myself have not gone back to back into the industry. I really didn't expect Kim to offer my job back. I didn't expect her to offer our jobs back to those of us who spoke out the most. It's fairly uncommon, actually, to be asked back. I don't believe one person at Red Stag that was laid off was asked back. I believe it's a completely new staff that they opened with, which is sad. It's very sad. Unfortunately, in my situation, bartending and being able to pick my schedule and working evenings most fits my schedule. So unfortunately, I eventually will have to go back to that until something changes in my personal life. But I have vacillated between accounting and bartending. Bartending has always supplemented my income. So we'll see eventually. Never for Kim Bartmann, I have to say that.
I stepped away from the industry during the pandemic and worked in a different field of service. I was a concierge at an apartment building. And then about 3 months ago, had an opportunity to go back to the industry, which felt right to me. Now I'm bartending at a new restaurant, not a Kim Bartmann restaurant. But I think for me, why I went back is because I love serving and bartending. I think what people forget is it's a skill, and it's a skill that I'm really good at, and I really love to do it. So I'm happy I found a place that I feel good about, but I would never work for Kim Bartmann again. No.
Yeah, I'm currently teaching, and a lot of teachers look for jobs over the summer. And so I'm definitely thinking about next summer and where I'd want to work. And I also really love serving, and that could definitely be an option on the table. But I didn't go back to a Bartmann restaurant or to a restaurant after the shutdown.
Are there any last questions? Any of the reporters, feel free to unmute and ask any questions. Any non-reporters have final questions? All right.
Is the Attorney General still on the line?
I am.
This is Mark again, sir. I just want to reiterate again, the fact that she stole our money. She used us as a bank. She took our money, our paychecks, our tips. She may not have had the money to cut her payroll, but she had the money to tip us. She collected all of that money from MasterCard, from Visa, from American Express. Those were our tips. That was the majority of our paychecks. And she used that for her own purposes for a month, approximately, before we got our paycheck, before we had to hunt down our paycheck. It is sad to me. It is infuriating to me that she can get away with that. It's also infuriating to me that she got the PPL loans. Also infuriating. I realize there's nothing that you can do. I just wanted to verbalize that. There's no other industry that would be allowed in. If anybody stole that much money from anybody else or another organization, that's criminal. It's criminal. And Kim Bartmann was allowed, for the most part, to get away with it. It makes me, just talking about that again, makes my blood boil.
Well, thanks for sharing that, man. I really hear you. I'm taking what you said and everybody said very seriously. I really am. And, quite frankly, we kind of upgraded our law in Minnesota regarding wage theft just in the last year or so. And we just started our wage theft unit. And look, I believe that there's got to be criminal penalties for some of the worst offenders, which is what I hear you saying. And look, if she took the money, if the money she stole from you guys, if she walked into a grocery store and stole half that, she'd be going to jail, right?
Yeah.
So why is it okay if she does it to you? I guess all I'm saying, Mark, is that I feel you, bro. And we're just kind of starting this journey, and I'm in for the long haul, and I can absolutely see you are too. So, by the way, can I just, I'm taking this privilege as like a parent. Naomi, it's great to see you. I know her mom and dad, and they're good friends of mine. And boy, oh boy, are you ever a chip off the old block? Anyway, I got to run to another meeting. Bless you guys. Call on us anytime at all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, I think we'll end today's press conference. I will just quickly, yeah. Did I hear a voice? We good?
Yeah, you're good, Ali.
Okay, cool. So tonight, this evening at 7:30, restaurant workers, supporters and community partners will be holding a celebration rally outside the office of Rock, Minnesota. You're all welcome to join. Thank you again so much for being on today's call. Really, really appreciated everyone sharing their story, and the questions were wonderful. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we'll end the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all.
Nice work, team. Good work.